The game Baker's Fury, released in 2016, is a game quite unlike any other. Focusing entirely on boss battles, it takes elements from bullet hell games and combines them with fighting game mechanics to create intense one-on-one fights that really get the adrenaline pumping. While the game centers around a prisoner that is fighting their way through various guards to break out of an impenetrable prison, the bulk of the story is told by the prisoner's mysterious benefactor, who reveals elements of the world to the prisoner between his fights. Things like the background of the world, how the prisoner was locked up, and why he's helping him. The stories he shares initially paint a picture of selfish desperation, but at the game's conclusion, it's revealed that the benefactor secretly hoped for an outcome that eventually came to fruition. Let's go through the story of Furi so we can see it from its beginning to its end. It all started with an unnamed alien civilization that existed somewhere out in space. This civilization was quite advanced and had achieved significant technological accomplishments. They built grand ships that could traverse space, developed complex AI systems that could handle complicated calculations, and created exosuits that soldiers called riders could use to dominate their enemies with ease. However, despite these achievements, the civilization faced severe resource constraints that threatened them with extinction. To solve this problem, they developed an AI named the Star and installed it onto a spaceship, whereupon it was sent out into the cosmos to search for a planet that had the resources the civilization needed. Once a possible planet was found, a rider was sent to its surface to gather information about it. If it was deemed suitable for the society's needs, a legion of riders were dispatched to the planet's surface to raise it and steal its resources, a process that was called assimilation. An inhabitant of a blue marble of a planet, a wise old man that had the ability to see the future, foresaw that this doom was making its way towards his home, and warned of the mothership's approach, telling people to look at the dot on the sun to see it for themselves. Sure enough, a rider soon landed on their planet. The inhabitants were no strangers to invaders, having dealt with and jailed a feral woman that appeared on the planet some time ago. But this stranger was different. He was much more powerful. Armed with a sharp sword and a handgun that shot balls of energy, he used his lightning-fast reflexes to cut down those that opposed him. Very soon, he had wiped out one of the cultures on the planet all on his own. And no matter what they tried to do, the people of the planet couldn't kill him. So one of them, a woman known as the Song, came up with a plan. They first had to stop the stranger's warpath. So instead of trying to kill him, which was futile, they sent an army of hundreds of men, led by a soldier named the Hand, to capture and restrain the stranger. Once that was done, the people then had to put the stranger in a cell and lock him in a prison that he couldn't escape from. The Song knew that the prisons they currently had were not secure enough to hold the stranger for long, so she got a genius architect to build a prison unlike any other one in existence. And he certainly delivered. Set in orbit around the planet, it was composed of 10 layers called jail worlds, with the stranger being locked away on the topmost layer. If he were ever to break out, he would only be able to escape after fighting through a guard stationed at each of the layers. A guard that, knowing they couldn't kill the stranger, were to attempt to stop him by any means necessary and bring him back to the cell. Given the importance of the role, the guards needed to be powerful warriors, and luckily there were many such warriors from the planet that volunteered to take on this responsibility. There were those that were motivated by hate, like the Chain, who enjoyed torturing the stranger as punishment for what he'd done, or the Scale, who wanted revenge on the stranger for the downfall of his society. There were those that were motivated by virtue and nobility, like the Hand, the Song, or the Beat, who each felt that defending their home from the stranger was the right thing to do. There were those that were motivated by the prospect of eventually fighting and overcoming the stranger, like the Edge and the Burst, who each wanted to fight the strangers themselves to measure their abilities against the strongest foe they'd heard of. And then there was the Line, who wanted to fight the stranger so that his time powers, which had weakened when he showed up, could be restored. Not every guard was a volunteer, however. At the recommendation of the Line, the people of the planet agreed to use the Strap, the feral lady that had invaded the planet before the stranger's appearance, as a guard, placing her in a prison within the prison. There was one last guard to select, and the one chosen was someone very reluctant to take up the task. It was the architect himself. His reluctance emerged from the fact that the way he had designed the prison made it so that the guards would be locked in with the stranger. And if they wanted to get out, they would have to go through the same process he would. In a way, they would become just as much of a prisoner as he was. If the architect were to become a guard, he would be leaving his young daughter on the surface of the planet without a father, which he would hate to do. Nevertheless, despite his reservations, the position was forced upon him by the song, and he soon found himself locked away in the prison with the stranger and the other guardians. As the years passed, the architect tried accepting the fate forced upon him, tried losing himself in his work and his duty, but try as he might, being separated from his daughter was wearing on him. He began to grow bitter and angry, feelings that only deepened when he saw that the Hand was allowed to bring his son to the prison with him, while he had to be apart from his daughter. Eventually, the isolation of the prison made his anger grow to hate. He hated the song for forcing this on him. He hated the Line for not stopping it from happening. He started trying to find a way out of the prison, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't think of a way to get past the other guardians. The only way past them was to kill them, and he was no warrior and would never be able to fight through all of them to get out. As he mulled over this problem in his head, a potential solution emerged, one that was blasphemous in nature, one that could damn the entire world if it worked. He hesitated going forward with it, but eventually, driven to desperation by his imprisonment, he decided to move forward with what he saw as his only chance. He made his way up to the topmost layer of the prison, snuck past the chain, and appeared before the stranger. Realizing that only he had the power to make it past the guards, the architect released him from his cell and pushed him to break out of the prison. The stranger walked to the stone arena before him, where, in the pouring rain, he fought and killed the chain, much to the thrill of the architect, who was pleased that his plan appeared to be feasible. He then noticed that the chain had managed to set off the alarm of the prison, meaning the rest of the guards were now aware of the stranger's breakout. He warned the stranger of the others, then offered to help him fight through them by giving him vital information and motivation, only seeking to escape with him as payment for the help. Wordlessly, the stranger accepted, and the two began to move through the prison towards their freedom. The architect guided the stranger through the prison of the Strap, the floating rock garden of the Line, and the dank cavern of the Scale, watching with delight as the stranger killed each and every one of the guardians that resided on those worlds. True to his word, the architect gave the stranger information about those he fought and motivated him by telling him to harness his anger and hate to help him overcome his opponents. The stranger had taken these lessons to heart, as not only had they been useful in killing the guardians, they seemed to be motivated in much the same way against him. Yet that changed when the stranger made it to the desert sanctuary of the Hand. When he came face to face with the soldier that had captured him before, he found that it wasn't hate that motivated him to fight, it was love. Love for his son. It gave him a strength that allowed him to push past his limits. While the Hand was ultimately unsuccessful in stopping the stranger, falling to his blade like all the others, seeing what motivated him to fight, seemed to have a small, unexpected effect on the stranger. His next adversary was the one that dreamed up this whole thing, the song. The architect warned that she would be tricky and to remember the anger in his heart to get past her manipulations. The stranger then stepped into the warm light of the garden of the song and prepared for a fight. But the song didn't attack the stranger. Instead, she greeted him warmly and admitted that locking him up had been a mistake, while saying that she couldn't allow him to leave the prison. Instead of trying to forcibly take him back to his cell, she asked him to stay here with her in the quiet of her garden, where the two could live in peace. Despite his nature as a warrior, there was something under the stoicism that desired what the song offered, a life of peace. The stranger could almost see what it would be like to live here with the song. But at that moment, the voice of the architect drifted into his ear, telling him the truth of what this choice would be. It dispelled the illusion, and the stranger, refocused on his goal, turned his back to the song and left. Her attempts at bargaining thwarted, the song then turned to force, attacking the stranger to try and stop him and save her people. But she was no match for his ferocity. On her knees, she warned that the stranger would regret this decision, and then accepted her fate. The stranger raised his sword, and then hesitated, like he was reconsidering whether he should go through with this. However, eventually, his resolve pushed him to bring his blade down and kill the song. The architect noticed the stranger's hesitation, and instead of being worried that his only chance of escape could be starting to doubt their journey, he said it gave him hope, hinting that it was something that he wanted to happen. The conversation ended there, and the two continued on, passing through the architect's jail world, where the stranger was granted a brief reprieve from battle as the architect opened the way to the next worlds, giving hints to the stranger as to why he was helping him escape as he did so. While getting through the architect's world was easy, the next two were quite the opposite and proved the toughest challenges the stranger faced yet. First, he faced the Burst, whose high-power weapons and traps stacked the odds of the fight in her favor. And then he came face-to-face with the Edge, who had dedicated his life to overcoming the stranger, going through rigorous training to become a fearsome warrior. However, despite their power, both succumbed to the stranger in their fights. Only one guardian now stood between the freedom the architect and the stranger were fighting for. One that was quite unlike the rest of her comrades, the Beat. The architect explained that although she was strong in her own right, she was young and inexperienced, which meant that she should make for an easy fight for the stranger, but also warned that she was chosen as a guardian for a reason, that there was something in her that was meant to stop the stranger for good. Soon enough, the stranger came face to face with the Beat, who fled across floating platforms, attempting to use turrets to gun down the stranger. But he was able to dodge past their fireballs and keep pushing the Beat back. Eventually, she was forced to use her last resort, a huge cannon that would fire a gigantic laser that would incinerate the stranger. But to her dismay, he made it past the blast. In a desperate final stand, the Beat begged the stranger to turn back while futilely trying to fight him off. It was a pitiful display. And though the stranger soon brought it to an end, he couldn't help but be moved by her actions and her dying plea. But at that moment, the architect appeared, and, with the final obstacle that stood between his freedom now gone, made his way to the portal. Just before going through, he told the stranger that since being released from his cell, he'd undergone some changes. And now that he was about to be set free, he had to decide what he was going to fight for. He walked through the portal, and the stranger followed a few moments later, coming to a breathtaking landscape of rolling hills covered with lush green grass, which rustled in a gentle breeze that blew in over the wide waters of the ocean. It was beautiful, and the stranger couldn't help but explore the environment. But to his horror, he found that as he made his way through it, his very presence was destroying the beauty around him. With his own eyes, he saw how his coming to this planet was leading to the destruction of its good. In his wanderings through the land, he stopped by a beachside property where he found the architect reunited with his daughter. The architect finally admitted the full extent of his plan. He had released the stranger not only so he could be reunited with his daughter, but also because he thought that by seeing the good traits of the people of the world, their dedication, their wisdom, their hopes, their warmth, their innocence, he would grow sympathetic to them, and instead of choosing to destroy them, which seemed to be in his very nature, he would choose to save them. The stranger was not only the only chance for the architect to see his daughter again, but he was the only chance the entire world had at survival. Knowing now there was nothing more he could do, that all his hopes now lie in the decision the stranger would make, the architect left, hand in hand with his little girl. Understanding now the choice ahead of him, the stranger made his way to a tower in the distance, and used an exosuit he found inside to return to the mothership, where he met the star. The stranger's automated report was damaged in all that he went through on the planet, so the star asked for the stranger's manual confirmation to assimilate the planet. While there was a part of him that felt compelled to fulfill his duty, to allow the various riders of the mothership to go to the planet to raise it for its resources, dashing the hopes of the architect, upon remembering the beauty of the world and the people that lived on it, he couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead, he resolved to stop the invasion by any means necessary and turn the blasters of his exosuit on the star. The AI fought back, activating security probes that attacked the stranger with fireballs, high-powered lasers, and waves of energy in an effort to try and deactivate him. But he was able to power through. The star then added its large mechanical hands to the attack, whose indestructible balls of energy made the battlefield a visual nightmare. But again, the stranger prevailed. Pushed to the brink, the star was forced to participate in the fighting itself, launching wave after wave of attacks that covered the battlefield in lasers, fireballs, and waves of energy, trying to wipe the stranger from existence. It only let up when it was nearly drained of power, hoping its onslaught had destroyed its foe. But out of the dimming light emerged the stranger, who used the opportunity to destroy the AI. As the mothership began to explode around him, the stranger made a quick exit, fleeing to the planet. But before he left, the star left him with some cutting words, making him wonder if the choice he made would even matter in the end. But proof of his impact could be seen in none other than the architect, who, hand in hand with his daughter, watched the stranger descend to the planet. This time, not as its ender, but as its savior. His risky gamble having paid off, the architect walked off to live the life of peace he'd wanted for so long, bringing an end to the story of Furi. It's one that has some powerful themes. Duty, responsibility, and the cost of war are some good ones, but the two most prominent are parental love and change. The architect's decision that it was worth risking the possible destruction of the entire world and the sacrifice of his comrades just so he could be with his daughter again shows the lengths that parents will go through to be with their children. And the stranger's ability to learn empathy and become sympathetic to the people of the planet shows the growth and change that people can undergo to become better. It was only through this change that the conclusion of peace and happiness in a game's best ending could be achieved. Maybe by taking the lesson the stranger learned and applying it to ourselves in our own lives, we could be like him and make the world a better place. But that should be everything for Furi. I think the game is more straightforward than some of the other ones I've covered, but if you have any questions or anything, feel free to ask and I'll do my best to answer them. Until next time, thank you for watching and see you later.